Hello everybody and welcome back to World of Warships Legends. My name is Spartan Elite 43 and tonight we are continuing our grind towards the Prinz Ruprecht and we are going to be looking at the Tier 5 Mackensen. Ooh boys. Let's get right into it. Henry J. Hyde is our commander. Now, I tried running the Aladad skill to try to buff the AP pin angles on this thing, and honestly, didn't really notice any better, any better hits than I was getting with Porcupine on. And this at least gives us better secondaries, which the secondaries are starting to become, at a range where they're going to be useful. They're not there yet. I think the next tier is where they finally hit a range where they're actually going to be useful. But for now, we get to deal with short-range secondaries. But, yeah. As always, we are running Flammable Cannoneer. I hate the Brawler perk, which is why I never run it. But this gives us a little bit more battery or main gun range as well as our main shell grouping. Though it does increase the risk of catching fire, which with this build's probably not a good thing because, I mean, let's be honest, you're going to be getting set on fire. So maybe you want to go with the damage control party cooldown, but again, is that really helping you when you got short damage controls? Not really. So the only other thing would be to buff your non-existent AA. So that's why I say it's down to Brawler or this, and Brawler is such a terrible perk more often than not. So I'm not really a big fan of Brawler. And you need all the accuracy you can get out of this thing if you can. Now, we're not running gyrating drill bits because of the hit to the battleship speed. There really isn't much going for this thing. And to buff its turret traverse, this actually has decent turret traverse. It's down to 30 seconds. We'll go over that in a minute. And then Aladad, like I said, I tried Aladad, and I didn't really notice that I was getting any better pin angles. And in this game, you're actually going to see a pretty solid showcase just from the regular AP, which is unusual. But anyway, we also have Marksmanship, and we have the Master Mechanic, and of course we're running Fight Fire with Fire, because when you're running this perk, and you have limited damage controls, this is a must. You have to have this, because this will save your bacon, potentially. Doesn't in this particular match, but you'll see why. Haruna is our inspiration, as well as Justinian Lions. Now, I end up trying to use Justinian Lions as a, help with the fires and stuff, but honestly, these secondaries just don't fire that often, or at least the bigger secondaries don't fire that often, so I don't think that these are actually helping us a whole lot. So you could probably justify pulling Justinian Lions off, at least for the lower tiers, and going to something else that helps, whether it be Palo de Revel for a little bit faster reload, or you go with like Charles Madden for a little bit faster reload and a little bit better turret traverse. Despite having a better turret traverse now, you still run into the issue where you're out-turning your turrets, because the ship does turn relatively well, and we'll go over that as well. But we're going to go ahead and talk about the aiming systems mod 1. Obviously, you could push the firing range of your secondaries out further with this. I personally don't use it because you're going to be using your main guns more often, so giving them a little bit of a buff is always going to be a good option. AA is useless on these ships. These ships do not have AA. You might as well just literally be standing on the deck firing a pistol at every plane that comes your way, because that's about all the AA you got. They don't have AA. And then, of course, we are running steering gears on this to help with that rudder control. You could make an argument for propulsion mod on these, because these do actually steer relatively well. It's not the best, but they steer relatively well. So you could make an argument for throttle jockeying, and you'll see a couple of times where this maybe would have come in handy during this match to have propulsion mod. So we'll call those out when we see them. Now, interesting thing, you get a very good sonar at the tier. You get 5.3 kilometer detection of ships. That German sonar is never a joke. Like, German sonar is disgustingly good. However, it's still not enough to really justify this line and the negatives that come with it, in my opinion. We are running the Alpha Tester flag. Obviously, this is purely cosmetic, has no effect on the battle. But we are also running the Type 4 camo, which gives us a better detectability range and incoming fire dispersion. I am not running any boosters at this point. Now, for the stats. Hit points, 55,120 hit points with a 19% torpedo damage reduction. Not very good torpedo damage reduction for such an older ship. Most older ships had ridiculously thick torpedo protection. That's why your American dreadnoughts and stuff actually, I think, had better torpedo protection than the Iowa class. Iowa class was a fast battleship. It was pretty narrow, so it didn't have the thickness that most battleships had, even especially later battleships having that extra thickness in the ship for torpedo protection. But yeah. Mackensen, 19% torpedo reduction. The guns are odd. They're 350 millimeter L42 SKC-14s. You get 8 of them, and they fire out to 16.6 kilometers. The reload time is not bad, but not great when you consider what these are. They reload in 27 seconds. They have the 180-degree turn time that I said earlier that's better, which is 30 seconds. It's no longer 45 seconds, so it's at least serviceable. It will feel like normal battleship guns. And there is something else I'll mention in this as we talk about it as well. Now, HE shell maximum damage is 4,000 with a 27% chance to set fires. It's not great, not terrible. Again, the smaller shells, and the problem with the fire chance on these is that you just don't land enough shells to get the fires that you need to be useful. So AP is going to be your go-to most of the time. Now, AP shell maximum damage, 10,500, starting to become slightly more concerning for anything going broadside, as we're going to showcase in the match. So at least you're starting to get some damage out of shells when they finally punch something. But still not up there with most battleships. Secondary, 88mm L45 MPL C13s. You get 8 of those going out to 6.7 kilometers with this build, reloading in just 3.6 seconds, which is pretty solid. They have 1,000 HE shell maximum damage, and they have a 4% chance to set fires. Again, 88mm, not the best sort of guns. They're not going to be pinning a whole lot. They're basically there to help you set fires. The 3.6 second reload time is a little bit misleading due to the fact you only have 4 of these on either side of the ship. So keep that in mind. You get 8 total. So you get 4 of them on either side of the ship. So keep that in mind. It's not a lot of extra fire chance going at any given ship. Now you do have the 150mm L45 MPL C13. You get 14 of those, and those are casemates, so you get 7 on either side of the ship. They reload in 8.6 seconds, though, so not the fastest reloading things in the world, but they are 150s, which means when they hit things, they actually usually do some sort of damage, and they have a higher fire chance with a 10% chance to set fires and 1,800 maximum HE shell damage. AA Defense, you get 7.92mm MG08s. You get 20 of those doing 34 damage per second, but the problem is they don't engage until 1 kilometer. I'll explain during the video of our gameplay why that's a problem. And then, of course, the 88mm L45 MPL C13 dual-purpose secondaries. You get 14 of those you get 8 of those doing 14 damage per second, reaching out to 3 kilometers. Maneuverability, maximum speed 28 knots, turning circle 780, which is solid. And again, the rudder shift with this build with that steering gears is under 12 seconds for a battleship, so that's pretty solid. I do enjoy the rudder shift. But again, buffing the rudder shift and the fact that it actually has a decent turning rate once it does start turning means that you're going to outrun the turret traverse of your guns. So in some situations, you're going to find that your guns are not able to keep up when you're maneuvering. Concealment, 13.3 kilometer detectability by sea is not particularly amazing. It's not bad, but it's not amazing. Detectability by air is 11.2. Guaranteed detectability is 2 kilometers and 11.9 kilometer detectability while firing in smoke. Armor. We're getting slightly better in terms of armor, but this thing still suffers from the same issues that we had from the previous Derflinger, which is that it's mostly flat armor. There is some sloped armor here on the belt and definitely on the bow, but the problem is the sloped armor, it doesn't really help you a whole lot because there's so much flat armor up here because of the casemates and the way that the armor is up there. You see how many angles, flat angles for shells to be caught. It's kind of the same issue that you get with like Kansas and stuff like that. There's a lot of places that shells can just punch rather than bouncing off of your belt. It does sit relatively low in the water, which is also another reason why that is a problem, because a lot of the shells are going to hit those areas that are relatively flat, and they're going to be able to just punch straight through that. Because flat armor is not good armor, period. And that's something that we learn pretty early on in warfare. If you angle armor, you increase its effective thickness. So it makes angled armor is way better than flat armor. No matter how thick you make flat armor, you're better off using angled armor. I forget what the exact increase is, but it's something like a 45% increase in effective armor thickness, depending on the angle of the armor. So keep that in mind. Now, anyway, now that my nerding is out of it, and I'm going by my freaking brain, so if I'm wrong on that or if I'm not entirely correct, I'm sure you guys will you guys will get down in the comments below and correct me. Now, the problem with this is, while it does have an icebreaker bow, as we see here, which is nice, especially at Tier 5 when you're going up against 15-inch guns and stuff, they do not overmatch you. You have a 30mm armor cap on the bow at the waterline. But the problem is, just like all the other Tier 5 battleships that do have an icebreaker, you do have 25mm of armor behind that, and that belt only covers a small portion of the bow. If anybody knows what they're doing and they know that they overmatch, they're just going to aim high and they're going to shred you. They're going to hit you for 15 to 20k right through the bow, and there's nothing you can do about it because you do not overmatch them in return with your guns that are literally like 13.77 inch guns. It's such an odd number for a gun. Like, when you think of naval warfare, you generally think of like the guns being like 12 inches, 13 inches, 14 inches, 15 inches, 16 inches, 17 inches, up to 18-inch guns. And of course, there were designs to go up to 20-inch guns on, you know, Shikishima super battleships and stuff like that. They were never actually developed. But with these things, 13.77 inches, it doesn't give you a whole lot of hope. You don't overmatch really anything other than cruisers, so you don't have much wiggle room. You need people to be stupid and go broadside. And even then, your accuracy in these are not particularly amazing. So keep that in mind. Now, we've talked about the armor, and the other important thing to notice about the armor, if we actually put the case back on here, you'll notice it's not a turtleback anymore. If we get rid of that, you'll notice that there is no turtleback here. This is a standard armor, you know, armor deck, essentially. There's no turtleback armor protecting your citadel. Let's get rid of that. I forgot about that. You can see it better here. See how none of the armor deck actually slopes over the sides of the citadel? Which means that your citadel, while it is relatively submerged, if you're making any sort of heavy turns or anything like that, you can be punched. And also, with any of those close-range plunging fire shots where you get those shells to come in at just a little bit of an angle, they're going to pin that citadel, and they could potentially citadel you. And obviously, through the bow side plating and stuff like that, if you're coming around an island, you got to be careful. But that's pretty much every battleship at this tier. So you got to watch. Well, actually, pretty much every battleship ever. So that's to be expected. But yeah, the fact that you have no turtleback is actually significant when you're thinking about these things pushing closer. You're not as protected as, say, the other line where pretty much everything has a turtleback. And the previous design, like I said, the Derflinger actually had a turtleback. So it's interesting to me that they actually removed that for this particular ship. And I don't know if that's going to carry on throughout the rest of the designs or not, but I look forward to learning. Now, overview. Secondary reach. Above average secondary battery range. Extended sonar. Has the sonar range duration increase, which we know it has a very good German sonar. It's very good ship detection. And it has on-demand repairs. But again, this is a two-edged sword. Yes, you get your repairs back quicker, but unfortunately, you also tend to have an issue with having limited damage controls and no way to buff that unless you decide to go with a cruiser or a generic commander that has fully packed. That's one thing we didn't talk about yesterday. You could go that route. Maybe that's something we test in the future, but for now, we're going to go with the standard, German battleship build and see what we get. Mackensen, battle cruisers that were being built during World War I, their main advantage compared to their predecessors was enhanced firepower achieved through shifting to 350mm main battery guns. She was designed in 1914, but it doesn't say she was ever built. So I'm not sure if she was built. But again, you start to see that there is some iterations changing here. We're not completely flat armor anymore. You're getting some sloping, which is always going to help you in survivability. But again, there is still so many flat spots for shells to get caught. And this thing does get chunked, especially by 15-inch guns, which are becoming prevalent. 15, 16-inch guns are something you're going to be facing quite a bit at Tier 5 and up. So having so many casemates and having all those flat spots is just asking for rounds to be caught. But other than that, she's not a bad-looking ship. The smokestack's not being symmetrical or a little triggering, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. And I will say this. This freaking... Let me see if I can zoom in. I don't know what this, like, locker or elevator system is right here in the back. This is a problem. And the problem is, this really does interrupt your firing angles. Now, the good news is, this rear turret can fire 360 degrees. However, when you're trying to utilize those guns, this little freaking elevator building, or whatever this is, whether it's, you know, it looks like some sort of elevator or storage, or, you know, it's got some vents as well on the back, so maybe it's got something to do with ventilation as well. Whatever it is a problem, because it ruins your ability to get this gun on target, which, as far back as this thing is, would be an amazing ability to fire. You'd have all three, or you'd have 3 of your 4 guns to fire at a much better angle if that didn't exist. But I digress. At least this is a 360-degree turret, which means that it can elevate over that and turn and not have to go all the way back around to get to the other side. So that is nice. That is one upside to this particular ship. If we look around the other side, you can see all of the guns there. That's your AA, guys. It's literally just a couple of machine guns sitting there, a little water-cooled machine guns going shooting. They got nothing. You might as well be shooting a goddamn pistol. They're terrible. Terrible. But anyway, as we pan across the ship, you can see that, like I said, I love the detail of these ships. One of my favorite things about doing these is just looking around the ships. I just enjoy that. That's so much fun. And with that being said, let's get to our gameplay. Alrighty, so we're going to be on Trap, and I've got a confession to make. I've already recorded this once as a narration, except me, I'm a dum-dum, and I didn't hit the mute button on my mic, so none of it got recorded. Yay! It never gets any better. I've been doing this job for 6 years. 6 years. It's been a long time since I've made that mistake. But man, it's one of the most annoying things that you can ever do. Because I try to do my narrations off the cuff, one pass. Like one take. Because I feel like those give a better vibe most of the time. Sometimes it backfires. Sometimes I end up with issues when I do those one takes where I don't have the energy or I don't have certain information correct. And that's something that you guys get to correct me on down in the comments below. But, yeah, I hate when when I screw up like that. Like, it is the most obnoxious thing in the world. Now, with that being said, we're in the Mackensen. And I gotta be honest, guys, this is a slight step up from the Tier 4, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a Tier 5. It should be better than the Tier 4. But, I'm still not sold on these battle cruisers. The downs definitely outweigh the positives. Now, having a 360-degree rotating turret at the back is kind of nice because it means that when you do shift from left to right, you're going to be able to get that gun on target much faster. The shooting angles definitely, as you can see, leave something to be desired. You have to open up a bit extra broadside because for whatever reason, even though it can rotate and go over top of that, it refuses to fire the gun over top of that little box. So let me know what you guys think about that particular thing. Is that a bug, or is it just simply that, you know, at that range, like at the ranges that we're firing the guns are at too low of an elevation to properly go over top of that little box? I don't know. But you can see I did no damage. I got 1 shatter out of a full broadside on a battleship. Yeah, not ideal. Now, Fushun is getting into a fight with our Nevny, and our Nevny is going to be able to take him down. He also has the support of a cruiser. And between the two of them, they should have been able to kill that guy much, much faster. Now, unfortunately for them, I load HE anticipating of being able to help our cruiser and our destroyer burn down the Andrea Doria. Because we already saw that the AP wasn't particularly useful initially. Andrea Doria is actually relatively tanky. We take a shot, and full broadside again, this time at 8.5 kilometers, we get 2 hits. Just 2. And that's kind of why the HE isn't really a valid option for me. Because 2 hits with the HE do basically no damage, and we didn't get a fire, so we basically ruined ourselves. Like, at least if we had used the AP, oh my god, we knew that the Omaha would be coming out of that smoke screen, so we loaded AP, and this should be a depth strike. At these ranges, any battleship ever should depth strike an Omaha, but unfortunately, we only land 3 shells out of a full broadside, and we only get 1 Citadel, so he gets away with it. Now here, we go ahead and use our secondary booster on the Andrea Doria to kind of give you guys a taste of what these secondaries can do, and as you can see, they don't really do a whole lot. Now, we do trigger our heal, even though it was kind of a waste of a heal, and that could bite us in the butt later on. But it is a kind of a waste of a heal, but I wanted to trigger the Justinian Lion's extra fire chance for the secondaries, and you did see that it resulted in a fire. Well, it didn't matter, because he died immediately after, because he went broadside to the other 2 battleships on my team. However, now that we've secured our flank, we're going to grab this cat. And we're going to focus our attention at the enemy Viserys in the center. Now, the one good thing about the German battleships is shooting destroyers at longer ranges is actually easier because you can get an idea of where they're going to be, and the shells generally spread out enough that something is going to hit. Usually 1 or 2 shells will find a destroyer. That guy gets plastered by something, and then we do manage to hit him with a single shell, which is big. Now, we do manage to get the C-cap all to ourselves. The Viserys doesn't have a whole lot of health, and our enemy, or our friendly destroyer that's right there in Bravo, should have no trouble whatsoever dealing with him. Unfortunately for the cruiser behind me lost a lot of hit points thanks to the Andrea Doria. And I'm about to make a turn that is going to secure the enemy's carrier's kill on this cruiser, and it is 100% my fault. He probably would have been able to dodge if it wasn't for me being a big oaf. Now, you can see I'm waiting for our destroyer to spot the destroyer. Unfortunately, never materializes while I'm able to look. Trento comes out. He's angled, and oh my god, we finally get the railguns. And, wait for it, pow! We finally get a pow, guys. It happened. We managed to dodge the first set of torpedoes, but unfortunately, our cruiser did not. And you can see I am desperately trying to find an I'm sorry button in the dialogue wheel, but there doesn't seem to be one that exists, unfortunately. Because I would like to, you know, when I screw up and I screw a teammate over, I would like to apologize, believe it or not. And I don't go into game chat for obvious reasons if you've ever watched a live stream. I cannot be allowed to be into game chat. I have done a pretty good job of staying out of game chat for the better part of the last 1.5 to 2 years. Because me and game chat are a bad combination. My mouth starts running and people start getting upset. Which, understandably so. I can't fault anybody for getting upset when my mouth starts moving. Now, Bayern is coming towards us. He's opening up the angle. We've got AP loaded. This is a beautiful look at medium range, which is actually long range for this particular ship, because at this sort of medium range, these guns aren't particularly amazing, though once again, we actually get a solid accuracy roll out of this thing, and we punch him for 11,000 damage, which is showcasing that we are officially at the point where our guns are starting to take advantage when battleships screw up. The previous ship didn't really have guns that were capable of really punishing those broadside. This thing can actually reach out and punish you. Now, we take all of the torpedoes from that, and that's a situation where if we had propulsion mod, we come out of that turn, we could potentially outrun those torpedoes. But unfortunately, we don't have propulsion mod, we have steering gears. So, with that being in mind, we do have a chance to potentially shoot the Serov here, and unfortunately, he has another squadron of torpedo bombers. Now, of course, he got a flood, because he hit us with all 6 of his torpedoes, because balance. And we have another squadron coming in. Notice we haven't shot down a single plane. This is, what, the 3rd squadron that has flown over our ship at this point? Haven't shot down a single plane. that's the power of this thing's lack of AA. And of course, he manages to get another flood. And now we're starting to run into the issue with the damage controls being a problem. You know, now the good news is, because we had that short duration damage control cooldown, we were able to get that flood put out immediately. The downside is we only have one of those left, and that's going to lead to a very poor decision on my part. Now, I'll give you guys a little bit of the background to my thought process in this particular situation. I see the skip bombers coming. I want to try to get my freaking guns on target and then turn in. I wait too long. I should have started turning in, just used the front guns to shoot at the Sirov, but I had to get that shot off. He comes in and he gets a double fire on us, which is catastrophic. A single fire probably wouldn't have been that big a deal. But now I've got a choice. Do I go for the damage con, or do I hold that damage con, because I could potentially get a heal off. This fire's not going to kill me, but I could potentially get a heal off, and then I save that damage control for if I get another flood, because lo and behold, he's got another full torpedo squadron heading in my direction. We get a full broadside out again, and we get another solid hit for over 8,000 damage on the Sierra, but of course we leave him alive. Now, we did pick up our high caliber in that salvo, and we do start to turn in to try to narrowly avoid as much, or make ourselves as narrow as possible, and he gets God tier RNG on this drop. Like, God tier RNG. It hits us with 3 torpedoes, which is enough to kill us. And, I don't know if you noticed, we did manage to only hit 2 shells, or two planes we managed to take out with all of those squadrons that were flying over our head. So the lack of AA, the limited damage controls really do bug these ships. But if you notice, we did get a second fire on the enemy Bayern. He did put it out. And our secondaries were doing okay. I mean, they got 35 hits. Not the most. We didn't really have our secondaries burning for too long because the enemy battleship didn't last very long after we were in secondary range. Which is problematic for, you know, these shorter range secondaries. But 95,000 damage, high caliber dev strike, top of the leaderboard, 2,396 base XP. Not a bad showing, and definitely a better ship than the tier 4 in my opinion, but it still leaves a lot to be desired, and there is absolutely nothing that says that I wouldn't rather be in the Bayern in this particular situation. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and if you like what I'm doing, punch the like button, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, I will see you in the next video.